It's winter in the Southern Hemisphere, and we don't like the cold, but this is the season when I wear these a lot. So that's the good bit. G'day, welcome back to Bootlosophy. If we haven't met before, my name is Tech. I'm filming in Perth on Backcountry, Kalikul Wajak Nongabuja. Now, this is the Russell Moccasin Backcountry. I've had this for a couple of years, in fact, almost exactly a couple of years. I got them in June of 2024. If you're new to the channel, you won't know this, but for those who have been here before, you'll know that I have a lot of boots. And what that generally means is, obviously, I'm not going to be able to wear them all that often, 120 plus boots. I rotate them, but really not at any great angle that does them any real justice. I tend to wear boots, in fact, I do wear boots all the time, every day. I don't have any shoes. The only time I'm not wearing boots is when I'm at the gym or I'm going for a run or something like that. I have different boots for different purposes. And so this one comes into its own when I go out on bushwalks in winter, because it is a beautifully protective boot and fantastic on the wet stuff, especially when it's gooey and squishy at the bottom. So let me tell you a little bit about this boot. I got this in June of 2024, as I said. And usually what I do is I'll do an unboxing, so you can go and see the original unboxing. And then I'll wear it for a couple of months. This allows me to research into the boot so that when I give you my detailed review, I'm able to give you not just a description of the boot, but I'm also able to give you a history of the brand and describe the construction methods that make up a particular boot. And after all that research, I'll put together a script within those 2 months. And in the meantime, I'd have been wearing them at least for the first 2 weeks every day, and then the next 2 weeks of those 2 months, once every couple of days, and then regularly in the following 4 weeks. So by the time I come to do a full review at the end of 2 months, I'm not only able to give you what I've researched, the information from there, but I'm also able to give you a fit and comfort review and whether or not they fit my feet. However, when I unboxed these, they were so comfortable that I actually rushed the research into these, and I did the detailed review within, I think it was about 4 weeks. It was so fast in my usual workflow. And that was because I felt them to be so comfortable with hardly any break-in required that I really wanted to bring their full review to you. So that was the history of these boots. Now, let's go a little bit into the brand. Now, usually I'll give you the full history of the brand in the full review. So this is merely a reminder of the boot and the brand and so on. So this is Russell Moccasin. The company is 127 years old. A few years ago, it was bought by the new owners. Luke Colby is the new owner and CEO. And I interviewed him when I got this boot because I was so impressed by it. I asked him for an interview, and you can go and see that interview. It should be appearing on the top corner there. You can click on it. It's not going to take you directly to the video, but what it does is it'll set up a series of cues that you can go and watch after this video. So 127-year-old company. It's famous for being worn by US presidents, several. It's famous for being worn by explorers. Wiley Post, the American who went into the upper atmosphere, took this up wearing these, a pressure suit with these on his feet, not a pressure boot, obviously. So he must have thought that maybe his pressure suit protected his bodily fluids from G-forces or whatever, low pressure, but his feet were okay in these. Also famous for explorers like Bruce Chatwin, the author. He famously wore these through his trips in Australia, I think, and also Africa. And the most famous of all is Earl Schaffer, a man who walked the whole Appalachian Trail. He was a war veteran, suffering PTSD, I think. So this walk through the Appalachian Trail in the United States was kind of a sort of a pressure release for him. The Appalachian Trail starts in the south in, I think, the state of Georgia and goes all the way up to the state of Maine. For Australians, that's roughly Melbourne to Cairns or Perth to Darwin. Perth to Darwin's a little bit longer by about 500 k's, I think. But that's the distance that the Appalachian Trail is. And he did it in one go over several months. His boots are on display. If you Google him and his boots, these boots are on display in an American museum. I think it might be the Smithsonian. Still wearable, in really bad condition. They're sort of cracked and so on, and apparently very smelly, but still in working condition. Tell you a little bit about this boot, the Russell Moccasin Backcountry. It's a real moccasin construction boot. And by that, what I mean is usually when I bring you boots, like Goodyear welted boots, they last it from the top. The leather is pulled across the last from the top. Then you turn it upside down. You attach the uppers to the sole construction through a welt and so on. This is different in that it is a true moccasin construction, like First Nations American moccasin shoes. There's a piece of leather that wraps up from the bottom. So it's lasted from the bottom. It's then attached, that's this piece of leather here, is lasted up from the bottom. Then it's attached to the quarter pieces. And this vamp piece comes down. And this stitch here that you can see, this apron stitch, gathers up the vamp leather, flips it over the edge of the leather that comes up. So you get this seam here. And then it's hand stitched through to provide waterproofing from the top. So effectively, the bottom of the boot is actually quite waterproof or water resistant because it's one piece of leather. However, the way this is constructed then is they put a Blake stitch inside the boot, attaching this midsole that you see here. This midsole looks like a welt, but instead of a midsole, what it is like it forms a foundational raft. The uppers that have been curled upwards from upside down is stitched into that midsole, and then the edge of that midsole is treated like a welt. They add the rubber slip sole, a second midsole, and then the Rochia Vibram Commando lug sole, and they stitch through all of that through this edge of the midsole there. This final Rochia outsole is glued on to that second rubber midsole that you might see. Now, all that sounds reasonable, except that the Blake stitch might let moisture into the boot, because if moisture seeps through here, for example, or through the sole, it might seep through into the inside of the boot because the Blake stitch is on the inside. So what they do is they create a second lasted piece of leather, again from the bottom up, and they slip it in like a sock. So in fact, this is underneath lined by a second piece of leather that comes up. So true moccasin construction, extremely water resistant, if not waterproof. And the proof of that is I have walked around up in muddy circumstances and water up to here, not standing in it obviously, but walking through it, and not a drop of water has passed into the boot. The actual shaft of the boot is unlined, which creates this strange mixture of flexibility and support. And I'll talk about that when I talk about the comfort of the boot and how it's worn. Now, the design of the boot is a taller boot than usual, 8-inch boot, and that adds to the support I was talking about. It has a gusseted tongue. This kiltie is not original. This kiltie is from Dale's Leatherworks. It's a bison kiltie, but it matches so perfectly that I wanted to use it to protect the tongue and my socks from the hardware. Solid brass hardware, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyelets and 3 speed hooks. A great combination. And then you have a pull loop to pull all this on. Really, really nice boot. It's just so comfortable to be on. But there is a weakness. It's not comfortable in certain situations, and I'll tell you about that. So how have I worn it, and what have I worn it for in these last 2 years? Now, I'll be honest, I tried to figure out before I started making this video how much I'd worn these in the last 2 years. I grant you it's not an everyday kind of boot. And also my rotation doesn't allow me to wear all of my boots regularly to the extent that they deserve. But working it out, where across 3 or 4 of the wet, cold months in the winter, I would wear these several times a week, sometimes even every day if I'm on holidays, for example. And at least 4 times during the week where I'd wear them during the weekends and go for walks on a Saturday and or a Sunday. And sometimes coming home from work, I'd change into them to go out for a walk in the parks. So they get at least some sort of wear almost every day in winter, even if it's just for a walk and come home. A lot less in the summer, obviously. Maybe once a month I might put them on to do some bushwalking, particularly when I go on my hobby of orienteering. That's when you go out bush with with a compass, map, and pencil, and you try and navigate through various waypoints that are set for you. And it's a kind of competition, or amongst friends. It's a bit of a hobby where you go out on your own. You each have slightly different paths. Also, over the weekends, my wife and I do go on bush hikes, not particularly strenuous ones. We follow trails. So the orienteering is where you actually go over the bush itself, not through any trails. But my wife and I will walk trails over the weekends. What that means is during the winter months, I wear this a lot. And generally, I would wear these in winter maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And in the summer, maybe once every couple of months. So I think I worked out on average, on paper at least, that I'm wearing these about 5 times a month, which on average doesn't sound like a lot. But if you wore these as what they're intended to be, i.e. a hiking and or hunting boot, I don't think you'd be wearing them much more than that anyway, to be honest. These have proved really, really comfortable for use in the use cases that I wear them for. The wear has been good. The soft Rochier sole has worn a little bit at the tip of the toes and at the heels, not by much, because I haven't been wearing them on concrete a lot. They've always been on forest floors and maybe some trails of powdered limestone and that sort of thing, some gravel. So that's what I've worn them for. They haven't been work boots or anything. Let me tell you about the comfort. So the sizing is a half down from Braddock. I measure 8.5D on the Braddock device, and this is an 8D boot. So like many other boots, like Iron Rangers and so on, you take a half size down. In that configuration, it's very comfortable for me because the 2 pieces of leather at the bottom and the leather up top is extremely supple. It comes from SB Foot. It's their timberjack leather, which is a very oily leather, very easy to take care of. And because it's so oily, it literally lets the water roll off. I put R.M. Williams's leather and saddle dressing, not the leather conditioner, the leather dressing on it, which is for oily, greasy leathers. It has a waxy, slightly oily hand to this when you rub your hand over it. You don't have any residue, but it just feels like it's quite oily and waxy. And what this leather is it's very supple. You can see how I can squash it. But also because it's an 8-inch boot and you can tie it really quite tight, it's very supportive for bushwalking. It's not like a super solid Pacific Northwest boot, which kind of rigidly holds your ankle so that you can hardly move it in your ankle bone flexing. This one allows you to flex, but it also protects you from a sudden snap if you're walking on uneven ground. What I have found when I've worn it in town, walking around in the city, is it's not super shock absorbing. I'll tell you what it is. I think it's because there's 2 pieces of leather that come straight onto a leather midsole. And then despite this Rochier Vibram outsole being quite soft, it's not like a Vibram 100 solid outsole. Despite all that softness, I think what it is with 2 pieces of leather and another third harder piece of leather, you tend to feel everything under your foot. I found it quite uncomfortable walking on cobblestones, for example, in the city. I also find it not comfortable walking on concrete pavements and so on. I think once your feet warm it up, when you first put it on, like most other boots, particularly like P&W boots, when the leather is cold, when your feet is not used to being in a boot, you slide it in and you go, why the hell did I buy this boot? It's not very comfortable. But within 10 or 15 minutes, the leather warms up, your soles warm up, your feet get to feel it. It becomes perfectly comfortable. It's similar to this. When I'm walking around in the house or on carpets, it's very comfortable. If I go outside on the pavement, I can certainly feel the cracks in the pavement. And definitely on cobblestones, you kind of feel everything. See, unlike a solid base with a cork layer like in Pacific Northwest boots, that solid base, when you hit a rock, your foot doesn't move around. It's like a raft. In this case, I do feel it underneath. And on cobblestones, you kind of tend to feel every rise and lump and hump. The exceptional difference is when you're out bush. When you're in mud, on grass, on soft earth, even if it's covered with twigs and stones and all sorts of things, it is extremely comfortable for exactly the same reasons, because you can actually feel everything under your foot and you have great traction and your foot flexes and the ankles tie around you and support you. It's such a beautiful boot to go bushwalking in, particularly in the forests around here, which have soft undergrowth and soft sand. Even when you're on a bush pathway that's gravel, if it's built on sand, for example, that's still very comfortable. The only piece of discomfort I have is perhaps when you're climbing up a rocky slope, when there's a lot of rock being exposed, and you get pieces of limestone rocks with nothing underneath them, and that's when you start to feel like you're on cobblestones. Otherwise, extremely comfortable. In terms of how you wear them, how they wear, I think I find that, as I said earlier, the soft suppleness of the leather just provides you with a very comfortable feeling wrapped around your foot. But again, because it's a high boot and you can tie it really tight, it gives you a lot of support in the ankle so that you can move in it, but it supports you from quickly snapping over. Unlike the tougher P&W boots, they sort of wrap you around that you don't actually have a feeling in the ankle movement. So I'd highly recommend this for going out bushwalking. I understand this is used very much as a hunting boot in the US, so people go out very much, I guess, in the type of bush surroundings that I walk around in with a gun. I don't have a gun. A lot harder to get a gun license in Australia. All right, so ultimately, is it worth it? You can get them ready-made for about $900 US. That sounds a lot. You can get a premier build and choose leathers and different soles and so on for slightly more, 930 or so US. That might shock you, but let's see what you get for it. You get a really well-made, handmade boot. There's a lot of hand stitching. There's a lot of hands that sort of cut the patterns, put them together. They use a stitching machine, sure, but it's guided through by hand. It's not a computerized multi-station factory. You get, I guess, American craftsmanship being preserved. Now, if you're an American, that should make you proud. In terms of the craftsmanship that you get, they're not 127 years old, but they have 127 years history of being passed on. And that's got to be worth something. The quality of construction is absolutely superb. If you look at the stitching there, you can see the extra care that's taken to reinforce that area. If you look at the hand stitching along the apron stitch, you can see the careful stitching to try and keep it as consistent as possible. Everywhere else, the stitches on the patterns, the stitches on the midsole that makes a welt, absolutely clean and consistent. The leather from SB Foot, Red Wings Tannery, is superb. It's just so comfortable. And the patina is starting to show, so it's clearly a kind of boot that will give you a patina. They scratch a little bit because it's an oily leather. I haven't oiled them recently. I've just brushed them to get them on the table. Although I forgot to clean the soles. So these scratches will go away with a little bit of conditioner. Look, I love them. I don't wear them enough to do them justice, but I can say that of all my other boots as well. I love them because they're so comfortable to put on. Not fantastic in the city, but I don't wear these in the city. Fantastic out in the bush. Fantastic to go for a bushwalk in them. Also waterproof, and I'm imagining in the snow they wouldn't be too bad. So, I think they're great. I'm not sure that they compare necessarily with other $900 boots, like a Viberg, for example, is made with a different philosophy in mind. They're made like from a P&W history with a dress boot in mind, whereas this is made with the heritage and traditions and so on as a outdoor hunting boot. So I'm not sure you can compare apples and oranges. You have to make up your own mind whether you think it's worth it. I absolutely do. I absolutely do, because in what I wear them for, as little as I do, I readily admit I don't put my boots through what they deserve. But for what I wear them for, I love them. These are just fantastic. From time to time, I put on my NYX Overlanders, say, when I'm doing some rough stuff walking. Some of the orienteering that I do is for some really rough stuff, and I would wear the NYX Overlanders. But for most of the walks through forests, I would wear these. They're lighter, easier to feel what's under your foot, being careful about potholes and that sort of thing. So there you go. I've gone through the whole video. I haven't even asked you to click on like and subscribe, which I hope you do. I hope you like this video. It's my long-term review of these Russell Moccasin backcountries. So come back next week. More videos. See you soon.